With over a decade of experience in both mainstream and alternative investments, Andrew Ludwig, specialist in alternative investments, distribution, and digital assets, have founded and grown companies serving asset managers, high net worth individuals, and family offices. As the leader of BLACK ONYX, a discretionary asset manager and FX intermediary, he drives innovative investment solutions, including strategic advisory services in cryptocurrencies. Welcome, Andrew, and thank you for your time.
Hey, Rianet, nice
Our
to see you.
role at FAnews, well, one of our more important roles is to educate. And one of the areas we believe really has a need for education and a lot more conversation is the crypto space. So we will embark on a bit of an education drive with Andrew, seeing that he's got the experience in this specific area. So Andrew, briefly describe what you do at Currency Hub Black Onyx and maybe just bring in your alternative investment background, please.
Thanks, Rianet. So, yeah, really in summary, as you would recall, and maybe some of your community, we have a long-standing relationship that has stemmed from the FSP Black Onyx, which I established in 2015. This was after I had served several years supporting several multi-family offices, high net worth individuals, and hedge funds. And there was an opportunity in 2015 when the hedge funds became regulated. At that point in time, I felt that a large portion of the audience, largely the retail marketers, the advisors, were simply ill-equipped, uninformed. And as a result, we're missing out on a fundamental opportunity that the institutional class investor had capitalized on for decades. The alternatives in that particular point of view were the hedge funds. And Black Onyx was established as a marketing distribution agency and went on to represent over 50 asset managers, both locally and abroad. And that was back in 2015. Around that time, cryptos kind of came into the space, and this also caught my attention. It's an alternative asset at this point in time. And I, like everybody else, was just completely confused by this thing and dismissed it outright. Fast forward a couple of years, we started investing in this asset class back in 2016. My business partner, David Farello, and myself went on to establish a more sophisticated operation, leveraging off the Category 2 licenses, the Cat 1 and the FX intermediaries, and that's publicly facing as the entity Currency Hub, where we specialize in crypto assets, OTC, sophisticated FX, and our arbitrage trade.
Cryptos is not for everyone. I attended the FPI conference and there was someone who presented on cryptos and the likes, and you could see the confusion and the discussions afterwards of people. It is not everyone's forte, but yet there are great opportunities. That's just a side comment. Why are cryptocurrencies your current focus?
Going back to that earlier question was about the education. I'm passionate about both investing and marketing, and giving access to information, I think, is a human right, and making sure that you have the right people sharing this information with you. So credible channels such as FAnews has endeavored to use the media and the publication and the use of CPD, for example, to make sure that we all are better informed. My payoff line, ultimately. But why am I interested in the cryptos themselves? So for over 15 years, I've consulted to multifamily offices, high net worth individuals, etc. These are sophisticated investors. And most of us just take for granted that we're going to invest in bonds and equities, and our limitations are largely through actively managed funds or ETFs. There's an argument investing in both of those. We won't go into that nonetheless. But the emphasis that I have made is diversification. And diversification allows you to latch on to top performing managers in their different classes and their different jurisdictions. And I am a huge proponent for a diversified type of portfolio. So I may have a more advanced or left-handed view to most out there, but I like alternatives because they generate alpha. Alpha is something different to what the market produces. So your ubiquitous ETF is a beta strategy. You will invest in the market. You might be smart enough to find an active manager in a CIS unitized type of structure who can outperform the market. There is a trick in that itself. But now you want to add those active managers to the passive managers and create a basket of portfolios and products. Some might have property, some might still like bonds. Me personally, I start looking further afield. So when cryptos came online and I started seeing other people in my industry who I regard as smart, giving a very, very good look at this thing in detail. And I'm talking about hedge fund managers. I'm talking about Forex long short managers. These are the smartest people in the industry. And they are probably being laughed at by many of their colleagues, but nonetheless, they equipped themselves, they got educated. And that is the trick in this game, is how did we become good at investing in hedge funds? How did we find good hedge fund managers? We spent a lot of time researching what this product class is to realize it's not this dark voodoo-esque black box. In fact, it's an alpha generator. And with the right information and being connected to the right managers and with the sufficient understanding, you can take full advantage of this, and absolutely should. So cryptos are at that space right now. If you think about Bitcoin being the first and most famous and preeminent crypto asset, launched 15 years ago in 2009, running off some stats just right now. So the 5-year annualized return for Bitcoin is 34%. That's in dollars. The exact equivalent of the S&P's return, 5-year average over 5 years, is 9%. Okay, there's a lot of volatility, but I think a lot of guys are seeing these massive swings in Bitcoin that suddenly sees this 100% return like it was last year. Then it's 80% crash. So if you can hold on for the volatility and subject yourself to an alternative asset class, you will ultimately generate profits in a different area to the rest of the market. And I believe a certain portion of one's portfolio should be committed to swinging the bat somewhat.
I do hear that this is most certainly not for the conservative investor, more for those who are keen to take a bit of a chance, right?
Well, let's get straight to the point. That would suggest it's gambling. Are we gambling on the JSE? Yeah, we are. Yes, we think we're making fundamental decisions, but the butterfly flaps its wings. What happens on that side of the world impacts what happens on this side of the world. And we have no control over a lot of the macroeconomic factors, but nonetheless, equities have outperformed every asset class since the history of time. So if you stuck your money into an ETF and reopened in 30 years' time, you'd be likely pleasantly surprised. All things being equal, we're looking through the rearview mirror at this point in time. And I believe the same is something with the crypto assets. There are lots of funky ideas that are out there, but I think what has become very obvious to me, and hopefully the rest of the world for that matter, is the institutional adoption of this asset class. BlackRock launched their Bitcoin ETF in the first quarter of this year, IBIT. It is the fastest growing, most popular ETF capital raise in the history of ETFs.
Sure.
That's got to be telling you something. It's telling you, number one, that there is a demand, and telling you, number two, that the preeminent, smartest asset manager on Wall Street is all in, and not alone, with Fidelity, and. So we've got an institution that has adopted and has now made it easily available to the consumer. And that's the key point, because when we started buying these things, we were having to use ledgers and USB sticks and exchanges and remember 24-digit codes and cut them in half and hide them in case people were finding them. If someone wants a really interesting book to read on this one, it was The Bitcoin Billionaires, the Winklevoss twins. It's a really easy read. But it shows what guys were having to do 15 years ago to trade this stuff, store the stuff. It was cumbersome. This is why so much of it gets lost. We hear these horror stories of fat finger errors, money moving in the wrong direction. No different to the Spanish gold trying to find its way into Europe 400 or 500 years ago. Nonetheless, it is a lot easier now. It can fit into your portfolios. And it's really available to all South Africans and everyone around the world in a way more regulated manner, notwithstanding the fact you will still have to tolerate some volatility.
Elaborate on the difference between cryptocurrencies and blockchain.
Yeah, this is a really good starting point, Rianet. I think a lot of people are just overwhelmed. They don't know what it means, whether I'm talking to my father, whether I'm talking to my sister. It doesn't matter about the age gap. It doesn't matter about who you are, where you come from. But simply put, let's work it like this. You have a blockchain and you have a crypto asset. Crypto assets like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana are the product. Blockchain is the exchange. It's the enabler. So let's use an example like an IPO, an initial product offering. This is what you would typically launch a business on the JSE with. So you and I've got a great idea, and we're going to sell widgets. And we want to go to the market and raise money to sell widgets. And widget.com is launched on the JSE, and we've got to create sufficient noise around the use case for these particular widgets. It's very hard doing that on the JSE. And that IPO has been replaced by, I think, with an ICO, initial coin offering. The coin offering is a digitized process where we now leverage off the blockchain. Think of the blockchain as an exchange. Think of it as a payment platform. So the coins that we are wanting to take to market, whether they're Ethereum or widget.com, need to move, and they move across a thing called the blockchain. And the blockchain is exciting to us because this is here to disrupt the traditional financial infrastructure. And the financial infrastructure that is become cumbersome is inherently very expensive. There's a lot of friction, there are a lot of intermediaries, doesn't operate 24/7, and it's held together through a lot of old technology. The new stuff, that is the blockchain, now enables these new coins to move across. Now, Bitcoin is an example of an asset. Ethereum is an example of a technology. Ethereum has morphed materially in the last few years, but there are over 8,000 crypto assets that would consider themselves coins. I do not dabble in anything past the top 5, quite frankly. Then we are certainly playing in the risky space. I look at stuff that's got market cap. I look at stuff that has liquidity. And ultimately, I look for stuff that has a genuine use case.
Give me an obvious use case for cryptos. Make it practical for me.
Okay, so let's talk about transactions per second. Visa, which we use on a daily basis, and MasterCard for that matter, Visa trends at around 2,000 transactions per second. MasterCard at around 10,000. Okay. This is the banking system that we are very happy with, notwithstanding the cost, the expense, the delays, the times, etc., etc., notwithstanding the hold that it has on most people in this world. Enter Bitcoin. Bitcoin transacts at a whopping 7 transactions per second. Ethereum trending at around 30 transactions per second. Bearing in mind, this is the old technology. BTC is 15 years old. The advancement in all these cycles where this crypto price goes up and goes down, up and goes down, brings in new players. Enter Solana. Solana trends 65,000 transactions per second. So let's compare Solana to MasterCard to Visa. The use case, as I say, at a banking level is to transfer funds, transfer assets, store, hold, custody, all these bits and pieces. But the movement of money across continents is frictionless. And a solution like Solana is a chain. It's looking to improve. It's looking to disrupt. It's looking to enable. So Ethereum has become the most popular chain because that's where all the developers were. It was fast. Bitcoin wasn't fast. However, the developers, there's a bit of a divide in this crypto space. You're either a Bitcoin maxi or you're not. You're not a believer, then you're ousted. All the nots have to go and explore things like Ethereum, Solana, etc., etc. In the meantime, the Bitcoin maxis still got very excited. They went and created this thing called the Lightning Network. That Lightning Network is a layer above the Bitcoin network. Remember, Bitcoin does 7 transactions per second using the same asset class, but different infrastructure. They are doing millions of transactions per second. So the disruption in the financial sector is, do I want 65,000 to 1 million transactions per second, or I'm happy with 2,000 to 10,000? You might say, oh, it's all working well right now. Yes, it is. Do I need 1 million transactions per second? Maybe I don't, but maybe I do, because it is way more efficient and it optimizes everything. But this is the key thing. It reduces cost. There's no friction. There's no 24 hours. I don't have to deal with all the intermediaries. It moves from one wallet to another. And I think this is the important thing. What I'm talking about today is a lot of gibberish and gobbledygook. But if you start going down the rabbit hole and exploring what this is, using what is the use case, go to ChatGPT. What is the use case for Solana? What is the use case for blockchain? You will be pleasantly surprised that this is not some bubble. This is being readily adopted by the institutions, and the Visas and MasterCards of this world most likely are heavily vested, notwithstanding the fact they are connected to perform payments with the crypto assets we are describing today.
Andrew, you a few times referred to skipping the intermediary. Can you just clarify that for me?
Yeah, I think, I mean, for the sensitivity of the community that we are speaking to, I am an intermediary. Your audience are intermediary. We are financial intermediaries. We do this for a very living. The intermediaries that I refer to that are being disrupted through the technology are all the layers that one has to hop through to get a transaction. So think about the bank. There's layers and layers and layers and layers and layers, whether it's compliance, whether it's exchange control, all these bits and pieces are materially important, but we can get through it a lot faster than all the layers between the banks. Use case in point. I sent some money to a niece abroad in Australia, and I ended up doing it through PayPal, and my local bank cost me 10%. 10%. What if you're a migrant worker and you are using, I'm not going to mention that, but other payment services affiliated with your banks? 10, 20%. The informal sector, where many of these people return home in trucks crossing the Limpopo, are carrying wads of cash, getting held up. And they're being extorted 30% by people to move these types of monies. You can now move this money at 2 to 20 basis points with a phone securely in a fraction of a second across the world at any given time of the day, because there are no intermediaries, not the guys like us.
Thank you. I just had to clarify that because I am a fan of my audience. So just thank you for clarifying that.
As am I. I believe we have a few more years left on this rock.
Yeah. Regulation, I think, a very important part, because a lot of people won't touch anything if it's not regulated, and this is something that has become regulated. So talk to us about the state of regulation for crypto assets in South Africa.
Yeah, so we made reference to the hedge funds regulation in 2015, and that's kind of where I kind of woke up to the fact that we could do so much more with this asset class if more people understood what was going on. And again, everyone was scared of cryptos. We had the likes of Bernie Madoff. We had long-term capital management. We had all these blowouts. Now, crypto has not been immune to blowouts. We could list them ad nauseum, notwithstanding the fact that South Africa as a jurisdiction has hosted some of the biggest global crypto scams in the world. Most recently, FTX's collapse. Sam Bankman-Fried, I see his girlfriend was prosecuted and is due to serve 2 years. And that's good. It's really good that that's all happened. The FTX story, it blew up. In hindsight, it was obvious. Michael Lewis's book covers it. But the interesting story there is everyone who, the 8 billion that went missing, has all been recovered. And Bitcoin's rallied 100% since then. And all the hedge funds who took a position in buying the debt doubled their money. Everyone has come out okay. But that is a really lucky story. What about the guys who didn't get their money back? What about all the scams and that thing? So enter South Africa, and kudos to the regulator. The FSCA steps in once again. Reminder that we were absolute pioneers in the advancement of regulating hedge funds back in 2015. Back in the day, I think we were the only jurisdiction with regulated hedge funds. Managers were regulated, but the actual product, the fund itself, became regulated. And this is what the FSCA has now done. They've taken the hedge fund experience as a proxy for what we can do with crypto assets. It may have been a bit of a rush, notwithstanding the grey listing and put some pressure on here, and they needed to find an actual home for the asset class. And there's still a lot of grey area, and there's still a lot of unknown around this thing. But what we do know is the FSCA has regulated crypto assets, and this regulation began in earnest several years ago. It kind of crossed the line in September last year. But as of December last year, 2023, everyone performing activities with transactions, intermediary and advisory services related to crypto assets needs to be regulated by the FSCA. And it's the standard category 1, category 2. As such, there is it's now deemed a CASP, CASP, crypto asset service provider. And you will see that feature on the subcategory of anyone's asset management license or intermediary license, Cat 1 or Cat 2. It's a fairly onerous task, and you have to have demonstrated that you have experience in crypto assets. Your compliance officer would have motivated to the FSCA that you can add this to your particular license categories. And then we need to go clock up a couple of CPD hours every year specifically for crypto assets. So whether you're doing advisory or intermediary services, you need a Cat 1. This typically serves most of the exchanges. Category 2 type of work, where you're now operating with a discretionary mandate. This certainly serves our function at Currency Hub, the crypto arbitrage trade. This is a materially important license to have because we are making discretionary decisions as and when to invest on behalf of our clients. We're also pooling assets at certain points in the arbitrage cycle. And anyone who's not doing arbitrage, anyone who's doing arbitrage without the Cat 2, well, you should ask a few questions. The FSCA is working really hard to bring more clarity as to what the exchanges need to do, what the OTC guys need to do, how all the different licenses and acronyms fall together, and it's essentially how it all blends into the requirements of the South African Reserve Bank, SARB, and the receiver, SARS. So there's lots of work going behind the scenes. We are actively involved in engaging with all of these regulators and serving what function we can, given our experience ushering the hedge funds as we did back then.
I think this regulation part can be a whole interview session on its own, which links to what are the limitations with regards to exchange control, Andrew?
So exchange control affects all South Africans. It is a legacy. It's a good thing. It's a bad thing. Now, there are two categories here. There is an SDA, single discretionary allowance of 1 million rand, and then the AIT, formerly known as your foreign investment allowance, FIA. That is 10 million rand. Now, the 1 million rand there is there so that we can travel freely around the world, and we can pay our dues on Netflix and order our stuff on whatever online store we need to go, and we don't have to get permission from the Reserve Bank to spend that money offshore. So whether you're traveling abroad, that's all fine. But the moment you go past that 1 million rand mark, you're now falling into your AIT. And that AIT, the 10 million rand allowance, you have to apply to SARS with permission to invest available funds offshore. So you can use the statement from your unit trust, your bank account, whatever it suggests you have immediate liquidity of, you can then motivate that you want to send X amount abroad to invest in something or another. SARS is constantly evolving. They're doing an amazing job at the moment. Their turnaround time is around 10 working days. The detail of which that they're asking for is off-putting to most South Africans, but it is detailed. It is serving very well. The requirements are that you need a South African ID, you need your e-filing up to date, and when you submit your assets and liability statement, which now covers a couple of years, and your assets onshore and offshore, you need to account for the funds that are about to be sent abroad. So your proof of funds would be the statement, source of funds explaining where they've come from. Rianet, we will fall under a global mandate of anti-money laundering. And we in South Africa are affiliated with 100 plus other countries out there, and we're all doing our very best to understand the flow of funds to prevent terrorist attacks and other nasties that occur through misuse of this infrastructure. So exchange control is there for an interesting thing. I mean, where it serves us, and the arbitrage is actually very interesting, because South Africans can only purchase 1 million rand worth of crypto assets offshore, whereas a company cannot. A company would need to apply for FDI, foreign direct investment, to invest in a crypto asset offshore. The Reserve Bank will not issue that. They will not allow it. So as a result, there is a huge demand for crypto assets locally. And as such, people pay a premium for these crypto assets because they can't buy them directly offshore. We can't use our credit cards to do this. And the SARB and SARS are policing this. So how would the South Africans be able to invest in stuff? So you can invest in exchanges that are the likes of a Luna or a Valar or an OVEX. There are certain types of things that you can invest in, either directly into the coin. Some of these guys sell bundles. Some of them have investment class type of solutions. But here's the thing about exchange control, is that if I buy $100 worth of Bitcoin in New York right now, i.e. offshore, I can come and sell it directly back to the South African market for 102. The 2% premium is what we're paying because South Africans want crypto assets, but they can't access them offshore. Therefore, there is a demand. That 2% premium is what we at Currency Hub take full advantage of. That is the arbitrage trade that we tap into. So that is an example of one way in which we can invest in crypto assets in South Africa. And I always like to encourage people to consider it. The arbitrage is kind of your gateway into investing into cryptos. You use your local assets. We get permission to send them abroad to invest. We trade on your behalf. Everything gets put into autopilot. My trading team will then convert 10 million of your offshore allowance, which you might not ever be using, like 90% of South Africans. And the 10 million rand allowance, it essentially converts into around anywhere from 120 to 180,000 rand, depending on the principal that you're trading with. Now, let's just dumb it down. Let's say I'm making 100,000 rand because I'm paying a premium for crypto assets in South Africa. That's a win-win. That 100,000 rand, that's a really nice way to start building your crypto portfolio, because we have used your existing investments without disrupting your investment strategy to trade a crypto strategy without being exposed to Bitcoin using stable coins. And we should actually touch on those just now. And that trading strategy will yield a return through the arbitrage process. And those profits, that is a really nice little nest egg for you to start dabbling in crypto. Here you take a position on Bitcoin, take a position on ETH. You think you're smarter than everyone else, don't buy a dog. No, for a dog coins. And play around, experiment. That's the only way that you learn, is by actually putting real money behind something. And you don't need a lot of money to do this. Like you can invest small sums of money on the exchanges to actively pursue, play, and engage with this new asset class.
Let's make it personal, Andrew. Without giving numbers, what's your crypto investment portion of your investment portfolio?
Let's not make it personal, but let's make it more professional. Chartered Financial Accounting Society, CFA Society of South Africa, published a report a couple of years ago. We would agree that this particular brand of community are conservative. Would we?
Yeah.
Chartered accountants? Okay. They are suggesting in their report that a portfolio, and this report is directed to pension funds, individuals should invest between 1 and 5% in crypto assets. So 1 to 5% of their total net worth into crypto assets. Doesn't sound like a lot. And that's the point, is that, let's use this example. Over the last 5 years, you could be compounding at 34%, that is Bitcoin, with 5%. Compounding at that rate, you're going to triple your money. We will assume that your portfolio has sufficient exposure to the S&P and other type of equities, and you hopefully are fortunate to own a home or contribute to the ownership of one. But the asset classes that are available to us should be considered as equities, as bonds, as a defensive mechanism, if you believe in that. Some people like commodities like gold. Other people like hedge funds, like I do. And other crazy people like even more alternative assets, like what we're discussing today. But here's, we touched on this thing called stablecoin. Here's another play. So several years ago, these things did not exist. The advent of this technology, like I used Solana as an example, we had Bitcoin that arrived 15 years ago, and then Ethereum popped up, and everyone got excited. And then all the developers kind of went to Ethereum, and then they split because they Bitcoin maxis and Ethereum maxis. And then Ethereum guys broke away and created Solana, and more and more and more. So some of the asset managers talk about following the money. Well, actually, they now talk about follow the developers. And you start seeing the concentration of developers on these particular projects. And one of the most exciting developments that's come out of the space is the stablecoin. And I'll make reference to a thing called USDT and a USDC. USDC, Circle, USDT, Tether. These are coins backed 1-to-1 to the US dollar. Basically, I am given a digital dollar. What do I do with this digital dollar? Well, remember, I can't send my money abroad. I could purchase a crypto asset in South Africa, convert it into a stable coin. It's still in South Africa. And I now have a hedged strategy using a crypto asset that doesn't have the inherent volatility of everything else in its class. So I think the use of stable coins, which is that we use on a daily basis in our enterprise, because it is stable by its very nature. There are stable coins out there that are very unstable, but these are synthetics that have not been backed 1-to-1, haven't been put through the regulatory requirements and audits, but the ones that we have comfort in using are Tether and USDC. USDC seems to have more characteristics of a more institutional type of grade type of coin. Tether, nonetheless, has 6 times better liquidity. So there's other things out there that are worth looking at. But look at the coins, look at the projects. In terms of I think people need to be cautious as well. There's so much rubbish out there. There's so many scams. I inherently am conscious that there are more scammers out there than there are good people. But at the same time, that's like saying 80% of the active managers will underperform the benchmark. You've got to find the 20.
Yeah.
And they are there, and they stand out. And how do they stand out? They stand out because they are ever present in the media. They have the credibility. They have the background. They are regulated. You want to do a deep dive into their online infrastructure. You want to ask questions. Look for reasons not to invest. That's the simple trick. Look for reasons not to invest.
I think after today's conversation, it is very clear to me that there's really a lot to talk about. So let's do this in another month. I think the topics are vast. So thank you for your time. For those who have any specific questions, feel free to drop me an email at Rianet@FAnews that Andrew and I can delve into with our next session. But Andrew, thank you for your time. Thank you for the education part, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you, Annette. And let's use your audience to maybe put forward ideas as to what they would like to learn about, rather than me suggesting where they should start and how they should start. And I am I'm not the best at what I do. I'm surrounded by people way better than me. And I think that would be really important for us to bring in other characters who can discuss the credits and merits and pitfalls of what we're discussing here. So we have a very unbiased view so that your audience can get to know other people in the industry and get comfort in what we're doing rather than it just being one narrative coming from one voice. Thank you sincerely for this opportunity.
I like that idea. Thank you, Andrew.